Most animals reproduce by a process in which special sex cells called gametes are produced by the parents. The female gamete is the egg, and the male gamete is the sperm. Recall that most adult animals are diploid, meaning they have 2 copies of each chromosome. The gametes they produce are haploid, with only 1 copy of each chromosome. The egg and sperm unite by the process of fertilization, and a new individual is created by cell division and development. Sexual reproduction arose early in evolution, and most species now use this method of reproduction. The value of sexual reproduction is that the random assortment of genes from the male and female parents is made possible. Random assortment increases the genetic variability of the population, thereby increasing the capacity of the population to change and evolve through natural selection. Sexual reproduction involves a number of processes that we'll look at in this activity. First, we'll examine the different types of fertilization that ensure union of the egg and sperm. Next, we'll see how the gametes themselves are produced in specialized organs. We'll then go on to see how the male and female reproductive systems are designed to promote successful fertilization. Finally, we'll explore the hormonal control of reproduction in both males and females. Fish and amphibians fertilize their eggs externally. They spend much or all of their lives in water, and their sperm can swim short distances to fertilize the eggs. Animals that use external fertilization typically produce many eggs. The developing embryos have far less protection than embryos developing inside the female parent's body. This male stickleback has made a rounded nest of debris to contain the eggs, and he aggressively protects both the eggs and the nest. This species of toad actually carries the eggs around on its back. When they are laid, the male fertilizes them and presses the eggs onto the female's back. Cysts grow around the eggs, protecting them until they hatch as tiny toads after about 80 days. Internal fertilization involves the male placing his sperm in or near the female's reproductive tract during mating. Mating behaviors have evolved that allow males and females to be attracted to each other in order to mate, even if members of a species are by nature mutually aggressive. In order for fertilization to take place, the male and female gametes have to be present. The gametes actually appear very early in the development of an animal. They are produced from a group of cells that are separated early on from the rest of the cells of the growing embryo. These cells that will give rise to gametes are called germ cells. They move through the developing embryo to the site where the gonads or reproductive organs are forming and invade the gonads. The male gonads are called the testes, and the female gonads are the ovaries. In the first stage of production of sperm and eggs, the male germ cells mature into cells called spermatogonia, and the female germ cells mature into oogonia. These cells will eventually form the sperm and eggs. The process of sperm production is called spermatogenesis, and it occurs in the testes. If we look at the structure of a testis, we can see that it's made up of highly coiled tubes. In cross-section, the tubes have a hollow center, surrounded by a mass of dividing cells. Sperm formation progresses from the outside to the center of the tube, with the most immature cells on the outside. These immature cells are the diploid spermatogonia. The spermatogonia divide by meiosis into haploid spermatocytes. They'll divide again to produce spermatids, which mature into sperm. The sperm are released into the center of the tube. The sperm are moved along the tube to a collecting duct. Until they reach the collecting duct, sperm cells aren't able to move independently. During oogenesis, the oogonia that divide into mature eggs develop between birth and puberty from the female germ cells in one of the two ovaries. These cells, called oocytes, are surrounded by other cells that provide nutrients for the immature egg. These cells make up a structure called a follicle. When the female reaches maturity, all the oocytes are suspended in the prophase of the first meiotic division, and hormonal stimulation is necessary for one of them to complete this division. The division produces a haploid oocyte and a smaller cell that will just degenerate. In humans, a follicle matures every month, and the mature follicle ruptures, releasing the egg through the wall of the ovary. The cells of the collapsed follicle grow into a structure called the corpus luteum, which degenerates if fertilization does not take place. Oogenesis differs from spermatogenesis in three ways. First, eggs are not produced throughout the female's life. All the egg cells are present at the time the female is actually born. When eggs are needed, they mature individually. Second, egg maturation does not occur at a constant rate. Eggs mature with resting periods depending on the species. In humans, for example, an egg matures each month. Third, an oocyte doesn't divide to produce two identical eggs in the same way that a spermatocyte produces two sperm. One of the cells produced by the oocyte cell division degenerates. Now that we've looked at spermatogenesis and oogenesis, let's turn our attention to the structure of the male and female reproductive organs. The reproductive system is adapted to carry out the manufacture and storage of gametes and to allow the physical act of mating to take place. The male organ used in mating invertebrates is the penis. In most males, there are two testes held outside of the body in a pouch of loose skin called the scrotum. The temperature in the scrotum is about 2 degrees Celsius lower than normal body temperature because the body's internal temperature is too high for the production of sperm. Unlike animals that fertilize externally, internal fertilization usually requires insertion of the penis inside a receptacle in the female. The female receptacle that fulfills this purpose is called the vagina. In female mammals, a chamber called the uterus connects to the vagina through a narrow opening called the cervix. The uterus is the place where the embryo develops until the time of birth. Sperm travel from each testis through a tube called the vas deferens. In mammals, the two vas deferens join to form a short ejaculatory duct. The ejaculatory duct in turn joins to the urethra, which carries urine from the bladder to the exterior by way of the penis. Several glands add secretions to the sperm, forming semen, also called seminal fluid, the fluid that is actually ejaculated. The seminal vesicles are glands that contribute much of the fluid volume of the semen. The fluid is alkaline, ensuring that the semen neutralizes the acidic environment of the vagina. This neutralization helps increase the sperm's ability to swim up the vagina to the uterus. Seminal fluid also produces fructose sugar, providing an energy source for the sperm, and a coagulating enzyme that makes it easier for the semen to be moved up into the uterus by uterine contractions. The prostate gland secretes anticoagulant enzymes and sperm nutrients. The anticoagulants liquefy the semen after it is moved into the uterus. In vertebrate animals, 2 ovaries are attached in the abdominal cavity by connective tissue. Each ovary contains many follicles. By the process of ovulation, an egg is released into the abdominal cavity near the opening of a paired tube called the oviduct. The egg moves down the oviduct guided by muscular contractions or the movement of cilia lining the oviduct. The 2 oviducts join the uterus, which connects to the vagina. In most non-human vertebrates, the oviduct joins to a common opening that serves for excretion as well as reproduction. In mammals, the egg implants into the wall of the uterus once it is fertilized, and development of the embryo takes place inside the female. The male and female reproductive systems are both controlled by hormones. Hormones are chemical signals in the body that travel in the body fluids and regulate processes by interacting with target cells. The principal male sex hormones belong to a group called androgens, produced in the testes. Androgens are responsible for the male primary and secondary sex characteristics. The primary sex characteristics are the reproductive organs. Secondary male characteristics are a deepening of voice, hair distribution, muscle growth, and aggressiveness. Primary and secondary female sex characteristics are controlled by hormones called estrogens. These characteristics include the distribution of fat, water retention, and breast development. The hormonal control of reproduction starts in the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus produces a substance called GnRH, or gonadotrophin-releasing hormone. GnRH stimulates the pituitary gland to produce 2 hormones called follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, and luteinizing hormone, or LH. The names of these hormones refer to their role in females, as we'll see later, but they are also important in males. In males, FSH and LH travel from the pituitary gland to the testes. FSH stimulates spermatogenesis, and LH stimulates androgen production. Androgens also stimulate sperm production. High concentrations of androgens inhibit excess production of GnRH and LH by negative feedback. Female primates are receptive to a male's sexual advances throughout the year. In order to make sure that the uterus is at its most receptive when an egg is ready to implant in the wall of the uterus, human and other female primates have a menstrual cycle in which the lining of the uterus is shed and regrown periodically. Other mammals have an estrous cycle, characterized by reabsorption rather than shedding of the uterine lining. In these mammals, mating takes place only at certain times of the year. The period of sexual activity in these animals is called the estrus, or heat. The reproductive cycle in human females is made up of 2 separate cyclical events. The menstrual cycle refers to the changes that go on in the lining of the uterus. The ovarian cycle involves the development and release of an egg from one of the ovaries. These 2 cycles go on at the same time. The human reproductive cycle takes between 20 and 40 days depending on the individual. It is divided into 2 main phases and is regulated by hormones released by the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. In the first or follicular phase, the follicle and egg mature under the influence of FSH and LH. The follicular phase lasts up until ovulation. As with the male, the hormones FSH and LH are produced by the pituitary gland, which is stimulated to release these hormones by GnRH. FSH influences the follicle cells to release estrogen at this time, which in turn influences the uterine lining to thicken. As the amount of estrogen rapidly increases at the end of the follicular phase, the hypothalamus is stimulated to release more GnRH. This stimulates the pituitary to make LH, and as the amount of LH surges, the egg becomes receptive to the LH and responds by bursting out of the follicle and through the wall of the ovary into the oviduct. The ruptured follicle becomes the corpus luteum. The second or luteal phase starts with ovulation and lasts until menstruation occurs. The corpus luteum secretes both estrogen and the hormone progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone reduce the LH and FSH levels, preventing any other eggs from maturing. Progesterone also stimulates mucus around the cervix to become thicker, possibly to prevent bacteria from entering the uterus as the embryo starts to develop. If pregnancy does not occur, the corpus luteum disintegrates, and the hormone levels drop. The low progesterone and estrogen levels affect the blood supply to the lining of the uterus, which is shed during the monthly period. If pregnancy occurs, the corpus luteum does not disintegrate, and the wall of the uterus is not shed at the end of the cycle. Hormonal control is also the basis for birth control pills. The most commonly used type of pill contains a combination of estrogen and a synthetic progesterone called progestin. The two hormones work by negative feedback to prevent the release of GnRH by the hypothalamus, which in turn turns off the production of LH and FSH in the pituitary gland. Without these hormones, follicle production and ovulation are suspended. When the woman stops taking the pill, the normal reproductive cycle reestablishes itself over a period of a few months. Although there are reports that some women who take the pill may be at slightly greater risk for heart disease, the risk is less than possible complications of pregnancy. The purpose of reproduction is to ensure the continuation of a species. Animals have evolved a number of mechanisms to ensure variability and assortment in a population. The most widespread of these is sexual reproduction between male and female gametes. Fertilization may be either external or internal. Aquatic and amphibian animals usually fertilize externally, using water as a medium in which the sperm swims to the egg. Terrestrial animals normally fertilize internally. The process of spermatogenesis and oogenesis produce haploid sperm and eggs in specialized organs called testes and ovaries. These gametes are produced from germ cells which are separated early in the development of the embryo. The reproductive organs are designed to manufacture and store the gametes as well as to allow the act of mating. 3 sets of glands in the male add nutrients and enzymes to sperm that help the sperm move through the vagina into the uterus where fertilization takes place. The uterus is the place where the egg will implant and grow into the embryo, and eventually the infant ready to be born. Male and female reproductive systems are under the control of a group of hormones, and the hypothalamus is the main center for this regulation. The female reproductive system of humans and other primates follows a menstrual cycle. Fertilization between male and female gametes occurs in animals from jellyfish to humans. The same basic mechanism of sexual reproduction applies in every case. But we should also note that as animals have evolved into more complex forms, reproductive systems have also evolved into complex anatomical structures. Hormonal control has become a vital component of the processes involved in vertebrate reproduction, and is also the basis for the most reliable method of birth control.